BBC News, the headlines. In a day of ceremony and sorrow, the United Kingdom and the world bid farewell to Queen Elizabeth II. As the state funeral began, King Charles followed the procession of his mother's coffin from Westminster Hall. The coffin was carried into Westminster Abbey for a service attended by 2,000 guests, including 500 foreign leaders, royals and dignitaries. All the generations together, the Queen's grandchildren and great-grandchildren, took their places. Crowds gathered to watch the Grenadier Guards accompany the late Queen to her last resting place. In the last act of a day laden with ceremony, the wand of the Lord Chamberlain was broken, symbolising the end of the late Queen's reign.
The late, most high, most mighty, and most excellent monarch, Elizabeth II.
The Queen was lowered into the royal vault and buried next to her husband, the Duke of Edinburgh. Good evening, welcome to BBC News. Queen Elizabeth has made her final journey from London to Windsor and has been buried with her late husband, the Duke of Edinburgh. It follows a day of the highest ceremony, not seen in this country for nearly 60 years, mixed with private sorrow as the state funeral was held in Westminster Abbey, the building in which Queen Elizabeth was married and crowned. King Charles, along with other members of the royal family, walked behind her coffin as it was taken into the Abbey from Westminster Hall, where it had been lying in state. Hundreds of dignitaries, including world leaders, joined members of the royal family and the public at the service. In his sermon, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, said the Queen had touched a multitude of lives during her 70-year reign. We begin this hour with our royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell on the state funeral of Queen Elizabeth.
On a clear morning in September, the world focused its attention on London for the grandest and most solemn of events. For a revered monarch who'd reigned for longer than any other, all the honours of a state funeral. Within Westminster Abbey, where great moments of history have been staged for more than 1,000 years, the leaders of many nations came together to pay their tributes. Macron from France, Biden from the United States, Trudeau from Canada, and scores of others. They joined political leaders from the nations of the United Kingdom, all the living British Prime Ministers, faith leaders, charity workers, and citizens, at a moment in the nation's affairs when rank took second place to the desire to pay respect. To the tolling of a single bell, the bearer party from the Grenadier Guards brought the Queen's coffin from Westminster Hall to place it on the gun carriage. At 10:45, the order was given for the cortege to step off. Walking behind the coffin, the King, his sister, the Princess Royal, his two brothers, the Duke of York and the Earl of Wessex, behind them, the Prince of Wales and his brother, the Duke of Sussex. From the Palace of Westminster, around Parliament Square and into Broad Sanctuary, the gun carriage was drawn by 142 members of the Royal Navy to the great west door of the Abbey Church, where as a young princess she had been married and later crowned as sovereign. As the coffin was borne up the Abbey's central aisle, among the family members walking behind, two small figures, Prince George and Princess Charlotte, aged 9 and 7 respectively, attending this most solemn of state occasions. On the coffin, a wreath with rosemary for remembrance, myrtle, the symbol of a happy marriage, and English oak, symbolizing the strength of love. And a card handwritten by the King, in loving and devoted memory, Charles R.
In profound thanksgiving, we come to this house of God. We gather from across the nation, from the Commonwealth, and from the nations of the world, to mourn our loss, to remember her long life of selfless service.
All the music and readings had been approved by the Queen herself. They included a hymn sung at her wedding. In his sermon, the Archbishop of Canterbury spoke of a life devoted to duty.
People of loving service are rare in any walk of life. Leaders of loving service are still rarer. But in all cases, those who serve will be loved and remembered when those who cling to power and privileges are long forgotten. The grief of this day, felt not only by the late Queen's family, but all round the nation, the Commonwealth and the world, arises from her abundant life and loving service, now gone from us. She was joyful, present to so many, touching a multitude of lives.
After prayers, the sounding of the last post and a 2-minute silence. The national anthem was sung, and the coffin was borne from the abbey on the shoulders of the Grenadier Guards. As the funeral procession set off through the great streets and avenues of ceremonial London that she knew so well, a field gun fired in Hyde Park. The way was led by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, Canada, the Commonwealth country she visited more than any other. It included military detachments from across the Commonwealth, recipients of the Victoria Cross and George Cross, and health workers from the NHS. The gun carriage was drawn up Whitehall and past the Cenotaph, where the standards of the Royal British Legion were lowered in respect. Following behind the cortege in a vehicle, George and Charlotte, with their mother and the Queen Consort. The procession stretched the length of the Mall and beyond. It brought the gun carriage to Buckingham Palace, past the balcony where she'd first appeared in 1927 at the age of 1, and where she'd been seen most recently during her Platinum Jubilee. Constitution Hill to Wellington Arch, close to her childhood home on Piccadilly. The military detachments and the bands were drawn up. The royal family watched as the bearer party placed the coffin in the state hearse for the final departure from the capital. The streets of central London had been cleared of all traffic, but the pavements were full, lined with many thousands of spectators who wanted to witness this final journey of their late Queen to her beloved Windsor Castle. The grey of the city gave way to the green fields of Berkshire. The long walk leading up to the castle was crowded for as far as the eye could see. The hearse was flanked by foot guards with their rifles reversed, and accompanied on a rural road by the pipes and drums and a sovereign's escort of the household cavalry. The hearse made its way up the long walk. In places, the crowds were standing 20 or more deep. It was at Windsor that the Queen could indulge her passion for horses. As the coffin went by, it was watched by Emma, one of the ponies she'd ridden in recent years. As the hearse entered the main quadrangle of the castle, 2 of the Queen's corgis had been brought out by the Queen's staff. Watching the coffin's arrival at the castle, the King and other members of the family. In St. George's Chapel, a congregation of people who'd known or worked for the Queen had gathered for the committal service. This is the chapel she had known as a girl, where she had worshipped as an adult, and where now she will be buried. The Queen's coffin was placed on the catafalque. The Dean of Windsor spoke of her uncomplicated Christian faith and her reassuring presence.
In the midst of our rapidly changing and frequently troubled world, her calm and dignified presence has given us confidence to face the future as she did, with courage and with hope.
At the conclusion of the service, the instruments of state, the imperial state crown, the orb and the sceptre, which had been presented to the Queen at her coronation, were removed from the coffin and placed on the high altar. With the King watching, the Lord Chamberlain, the most senior official in the royal household, broke his wand, a white staff which is the symbol of his authority, and placed it on the coffin. The public lamentation for the life and reign of Elizabeth II was coming to a close. It was time for the world to draw back, to leave her finally to her family for her burial this evening in a small side chapel alongside her late husband. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News.
Well, as we heard in Nicholas's report, the funeral was attended by more than 2,000 people, including heads of state from around the world, as well as foreign royalty.